Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine waking before sunrise in the capital of Burkina Faso, the streets still quiet, the air heavy with silence. Then, in the shadows of dawn, 17 different compounds across Ouagadougou are struck at the very same moment. What looked like harmless offices, aid groups, tech startups, development programs were suddenly revealed as something else. Inside those glass-walled buildings and low warehouses, investigators found secret servers, encrypted routers, and mountains of files. More than 2 million records of Burkinabé citizens were seized in just a few hours. These files held biometric scans, call logs, and even confidential cabinet discussions. The order came from Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself. The mission has been named Operation Clear Sight. Officials describe it as surgical, quiet, and decisive. No civilians were harmed. But the shockwaves continue to ripple far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Why? Because evidence shows the data was not staying inside the country. It was being copied and sent abroad. Investigators traced connections all the way to Herzliya, Israel. The discovery raises questions that reach the heart of sovereignty. If your nation's information, the lifeblood of modern governance, is harvested from outside, can independence still exist? Across Africa, voices are calling this not just a security operation, but the first battle in a struggle for digital borders. Land, territory, and armies once defined power. Today, the battlefield is fiber cables, satellites, and hidden codes. And so I ask you tonight, is this the moment when Africa begins to declare digital independence? Or is it only the start of a much larger confrontation? Stay with me. Over the next hour, we will explore the events of that dawn raid, the intelligence uncovered, the responses across Africa, and the diplomatic storm now brewing. If this story moves your heart, do not let it fade. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us by subscribing, so together we can follow every step of this unfolding truth. The question is, what exactly did they find inside those 17 buildings? The order was given at 5 o'clock in the morning. By 7 a.m., the streets of Ouagadougou were no longer silent. Convoys of unmarked black vehicles rolled through the city. Helicopters hovered above certain districts. At exactly the same moment, 17 separate facilities were stormed. The mission unfolded with military precision. From the outside, these locations appeared ordinary. One was a digital agriculture NGO with shiny posters about food security. Another was a youth innovation hub with slogans about education. A third was a small warehouse near the Ministry of Education, barely noticed by passers-by. To the public eye, they were providers of hope and progress. But inside, the truth was very different. In the warehouse 2 blocks from the ministry, investigators discovered entire databases holding records of nearly 2 million Burkinabé citizens. Names, addresses, biometric scans, call logs, and metadata stretching back 8 years. All of it stored in racks of servers that hummed through the night. Officials later confirmed that these machines were sending streams of information through hidden telecom routes that bypassed national security filters. Another site on the eastern edge of the city revealed a shocking find. What was presented as an office for digital farming solutions turned out to be a covert data hub. Behind the glass panels, investigators uncovered encrypted routers, satellite transmission nodes, and racks of hard drives. Each device was linked to IP addresses traced to Herzliya, Israel, home to some of the world's most advanced cyber intelligence firms. By 8:45 in the morning, all 17 locations were secured. Not a single civilian casualty was reported. Troops carried out the operation in silence, removing servers and hard drives into sealed evidence containers. Eyewitnesses told reporters they saw long lines of equipment being loaded into military trucks. Videos posted online showed soldiers carrying out large metal cases and stacks of documents. Inside these facilities, investigators found more than just personal data. One file matched the coordinates of Burkina Faso's gold and manganese deposits. Astonishingly, identical maps later surfaced in Tel Aviv. Another file contained minutes from government cabinet meetings, including sensitive discussions on defense and economic policy. Officials admitted that this level of infiltration was unprecedented. Colonel Issoufou Zongo, the armed forces spokesperson, declared during a press briefing, "What we discovered was not development assistance. It was systematic surveillance. Burkina Faso cannot tolerate the exploitation of its citizens' privacy, its natural resources, or its national security." Digital security experts quickly echoed his words. Dr. Samuel Kabora, a researcher at the University of Ouagadougou, explained, "This was not symbolic. It was a decisive act. For the first time, a West African nation dismantled an espionage infrastructure in broad daylight." Social media platforms erupted. Hashtags like #Africa Not For Sale and #Our Data Our Choice trended across West Africa. Citizens posted their support for the government's actions, praising the soldiers who carried out the raid. Markets in Ouagadougou buzzed with discussions. One vendor told a journalist, "We thought they were helping us, but all along they were stealing from us. Now we know the truth." Despite the flood of local reporting, international networks remained mostly silent in the first hours. Western outlets offered no breaking coverage, but African channels filled the gap, running rolling updates and live commentary. This silence from abroad only fueled suspicion. What did foreign governments know? And why were they hesitant to report it? By the end of the morning, fragments of evidence had already leaked. Photographs of seized servers, diagrams of fiber optic cables linking Burkina Faso's backbone to foreign relay stations, intercepted cabinet discussions stored on encrypted files, satellite images of resource-rich zones aligned with foreign intelligence dossiers. The puzzle was becoming clear. This was not an isolated event. It was part of a network that stretched far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. For ordinary people, the discovery was both shocking and empowering. Shock, because their privacy had been violated on a massive scale. Empowering, because their country had finally taken a stand. As one student put it during a street interview, "This is our second independence. First we fought for land," or "Now we fight for data." The raid had ended, but the real question was just beginning. Were these facilities acting alone, or were they nodes in a larger empire of surveillance? If 17 buildings in one city could hide so much, what else had been embedded across Africa during the last 15 years? As investigators analyzed the seized servers, a troubling picture emerged. Encryption protocols were advanced, the architecture sophisticated, and the volume of data massive. Experts quickly concluded that these were not isolated offices working in the shadows. They were coordinated nodes, connected into a much larger system. The trail led directly to Israel. Technical signatures pointed to Herzliya, a coastal city long associated with cyber intelligence companies. For analysts, this was no coincidence. The data flow was too deliberate, too structured. Burkina Faso had stumbled onto a network that had been quietly embedded across Africa for more than 15 years. When these findings were shared with senior officials, Captain Ibrahim Traoré wasted no time. He addressed the nation from the presidential podium. His voice was steady, his message direct. "Africa is no longer your laboratory. We are not your test subjects, and this continent will no longer be your blind spot." His words, broadcast live, ignited a wave of responses across the region. Within hours, neighboring countries began to act. In Bamako, Mali shut down 3 firms suspected of funneling data abroad. In Niamey, Niger exposed a surveillance compound hidden inside a foreign embassy. Guinea announced the freezing of all military imports tied to Israeli suppliers. And in Lomé, Togo suspended telecom contracts pending a full investigation. This was not only a national reaction, it was regional. For decades, West African leaders had spoken about aid packages and foreign loans. Now, for the first time in years, they were speaking about defense. Defense of sovereignty, not against armies, but against invisible networks. Across African cities, ordinary citizens took to the streets. In Bamako, students carried banners reading, "Africa is not for sale." In Conakry, mothers marched peacefully with placards declaring, "Digital sovereignty is national sovereignty." In Ouagadougou, activists painted walls with slogans, "Our data, our choice." These voices carried a mix of anger, pride, and resolve. But perhaps the most dramatic moment came from a private phone call. Within 24 hours of the raids, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu placed a direct call to Captain Traoré. According to Burkinabé officials, the conversation lasted 12 minutes. Netanyahu insisted that Israel's activities in Africa were developmental, not espionage. He warned that Burkina Faso risked destabilizing not only itself, but the entire region. Traoré's response was firm and uncompromising. "There is no misunderstanding when you spy on us," he said. "That is not development. That is occupation." The call ended without resolution. Netanyahu did not call again. News of this exchange spread quickly. In Paris, newspapers labeled Traoré authoritarian. In London, editorials described him as destabilizing. In Washington, think tanks framed him as radical, even dangerous. Yet on African streets, his image grew stronger. To many, he was no longer just a young military captain. He had become the voice of defiance, the man willing to stand up where others had remained silent. The reaction on social media was overwhelming. Hashtags like Africa Rise and Not for Sale surged across platforms. Young Africans recorded videos calling for unity. Elders drew comparisons to independence struggles of the past. The sentiment was clear. If one nation's sovereignty could be compromised, then every nation was at risk. Meanwhile, 6 heads of state gathered in Ouagadougou for a closed-door summit. Mali, Guinea, Niger, Togo, Ghana, and Benin sent their leaders, advisors, and security chiefs. On the table lay a folder of documents seized during the raids. Traoré proposed a continental framework for digital sovereignty. His draft included 4 pillars. No foreign telecom investment without full transparency of hardware and software ownership. All citizen data must remain stored on servers physically located in Africa. Any undeclared intelligence activity by a foreign entity would result in immediate expulsion. An attack on one nation's digital sovereignty would be treated as an attack on all. The proposal was met with cautious support, but growing momentum. Ghana's president suggested oversight councils of engineers and jurists rather than politicians. Togo's delegation demanded binding legal rules. By the end of the summit, each leader signed a declaration recognizing digital sovereignty as a continental priority. Observers compared the moment to the Monroe Doctrine in the United States, but reborn for Africa in the digital age. For the first time in modern memory, African nations were not appealing for help from abroad. They were building a doctrine to defend themselves from it. But would this new doctrine survive the weight of global pressure? The answer would soon be tested as Western governments and international corporations began to respond. The days following Operation Clear Sight were unlike anything Burkina Faso had seen in decades. The raid did more than expose a hidden network. It forced the entire nation to reconsider what sovereignty meant in the 21st century. For ordinary citizens, the revelations were deeply personal. Markets buzzed with conversations. Mothers spoke with anger about their children's medical records being stored overseas. Fathers worried about bank details, call histories, and voting data. Young people, many of them students, framed the discovery as a second independence. "We thought independence was about borders," one student told a local reporter. "But now we see it is also about servers, about who holds our information." Government officials echoed that sentiment. They declared that digital sovereignty was as important as territorial sovereignty. Laws were drafted within weeks. New regulations required that all citizen data be stored on servers physically located inside Burkina Faso. Foreign companies were told they must submit to regular third-party audits. Non-compliance would mean expulsion. The changes were swift. In the 6 months after the raids, internet speeds in the capital doubled. Consumer data costs dropped by nearly half. Officials reported that cybersecurity breaches fell by 47% compared to the year before. Citizens noticed the difference. Community internet centers opened across Ouagadougou, providing affordable access without fear of surveillance. For the first time, families could stream lectures and medical consultations with confidence that their data was protected. The impact rippled into politics. For years, opposition groups had accused the government of being too reliant on foreign aid and external contracts. Now, those voices grew louder. Parliamentarians debated whether Burkina Faso should review every international agreement signed in the digital and telecom sectors. Civil society organizations called for public hearings, demanding transparency about what had been discovered and how such infiltration had been allowed for so long. Trust in foreign aid organizations suffered. Many Burkinabé began to view NGOs and international contractors with suspicion. Could a humanitarian office also be a cover for espionage? Could a development project conceal a server transmitting data abroad? These questions shook the credibility of genuine partnerships. Activists warned that the line between assistance and exploitation had been blurred beyond recognition. The revelations also brought a cultural shift. In schools and universities, lectures on independence and colonialism began, including discussions on data rights. Teachers reminded students that while their grandparents fought for land, they might have to fight for digital freedom. Radio stations across the country aired debates on privacy, sovereignty, and the meaning of independence in the digital era. Politically, Ibrahim Traoré emerged stronger. Critics who once dismissed him as a young soldier without vision now recognized his role as the leader who had exposed a hidden empire. His popularity soared, not only in Burkina Faso, but across the region. Posters of Traoré appeared in markets with slogans like, "He defends our land, he defends our data." But with this newfound authority came greater responsibility. The government faced pressure to deliver lasting reforms, not just slogans. Skeptics warned that without sustained investment in local engineers, data centers, and cybersecurity, sovereignty could remain only a word. "We cannot replace foreign masters with empty promises," one journalist wrote in a local paper. The political consequences extended beyond Burkina Faso's borders. In Mali, Guinea, and Niger, lawmakers introduced bills to regulate foreign technology firms. In Nigeria, opposition parties demanded a full audit of telecom contracts. Across West Africa, leaders debated whether to adopt Traoré's proposed framework as a regional standard. Civil society took the lead. Grassroots movements spread with slogans like, "No cloud unless it's ours." Street artists painted murals of chains made of data being broken by young Africans. Community leaders compared the struggle to past fights for land, freedom, and dignity. This new wave of activism reached the African Union. Delegates debated whether digital sovereignty should be enshrined as a collective principle. At a special session in Addis Ababa, Nigeria's representative declared, "If one nation's data is stolen, all nations are at risk. If one loses sovereignty, all of us lose." The chamber erupted in applause. For many Africans, this was no longer just a Burkinabé issue. It had become a continental one. A hidden empire had been unveiled, and with it came the realization that independence was still incomplete. The people of Africa wanted more than promises. They wanted guarantees. But how would the wider world react to Africa's new determination? Would the United States and Europe support these reforms? Or would they see them as a threat? The answer would come quickly. The fallout from Operation Clear Sight did not stop at Africa's borders. Within days, the confrontation turned global. In Washington, the State Department issued a cautious statement. Officials urged restraint and warned Burkina Faso against what they called reactionary isolationism. Think tanks labeled Traore a radical figure, suggesting his policies could destabilize West Africa. Some U.S. analysts admitted privately, however, that the evidence seized in Ouagadougou was credible. Independent cybersecurity experts in South Africa and Kenya confirmed the authenticity of leaked documents. In Paris and London, the response was sharper. French newspapers described Traoré as authoritarian. British editorials warned that Burkina Faso's new doctrine could disrupt investment and military cooperation. The European Union even hinted at sanctions, framing Africa's digital sovereignty push as a violation of international trade norms. Meanwhile, Israel denied the accusations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted that the operations in Africa were purely developmental. He called Traoré's claims misunderstandings, yet photographs of seized routers and servers circulated widely online, undermining those denials. The images were powerful. Machines connected to foreign IP addresses, intercepted cabinet files, and detailed maps of mineral reserves. Outside the West, the reaction was very different. China offered to build new data centers under full African ownership. India pledged to train engineers and create jobs in local tech industries. Russia proposed cybersecurity partnerships, emphasizing African oversight. For the first time in decades, African governments were not simply receivers of aid. They were negotiators, setting conditions. The media battle became fierce. Western outlets echoed concerns of instability, but African and Asian media framed the raids as a turning point for independence. Al Jazeera called it the unveiling of a hidden empire. China's Global Times described it as a new chapter in Africa's technological freedom. Russian outlets labeled it proof of Western hypocrisy. On social platforms, the African narrative was louder. Hashtags like Africa Rise, #Our Data, Our Choice, and digital sovereignty overshadowed Western talking points. Polls showed overwhelming support among young Africans for new sovereignty laws. For them, independence was no longer about borders on a map. It was about codes, cables, and the invisible infrastructure shaping their daily lives. But could Africa sustain this momentum under mounting international pressure? The test would come in the years ahead, as sanctions loomed and promises of support competed with the weight of global power. Operation Clear Sight began as a dawn raid on 17 hidden facilities in Ouagadougou. But it has become far more than a national operation. It is now a symbol of Africa's fight for sovereignty in the digital age. The revelations shook the foundations of trust. They showed that maps of mineral reserves, cabinet discussions, and millions of personal records were not safe. They were copied, stored abroad, and used without consent. For many, this discovery proved that independence in the modern world is not written only in constitutions or defended only by armies. It is decided in servers, in cables, in the invisible flow of data. In the months since the raids, Burkina Faso has seen progress: faster internet, lower costs, and stronger security. But challenges remain. Building secure data centers, training local engineers, and enforcing new rules will demand resources and unity. Without it, digital sovereignty could remain a slogan rather than a reality. And yet, there is hope. From Mali to Nigeria, from Guinea to Morocco, voices are rising. Citizens, students, and leaders are declaring that Africa will no longer bow to hidden empires. The struggle is not only about defending land. It is about protecting identity, dignity, and freedom in a connected world. So we must ask, Ibrahim Traoré, hero of a new independence, or a spark that could ignite global confrontation? Is Operation Clear Sight the beginning of liberation, or the start of a dangerous clash? The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Africa is speaking with a louder voice than ever before. If this story moved your heart, let it not fade. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see Traoré as hope or as risk? And if you wish to walk with us through this journey of truth, subscribe now, so together we can follow every step of Africa's rising voice. Remember this, sovereignty today is not only about borders drawn on maps. It is about the unseen lines of code, the cables beneath our soil, and the satellites above our skies. Independence will be won not only on battlefields, but in the cloud. Africa bows to no one.